Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I, as always, am the Magi, and just in case you've been under a rock for the last 4 or 5 days, there's big news. Standard is increasing to a 3-year rotation from 2. And a lot of people have various reactions on this, the knee-jerk variety. Some are all for it, some are very against it. A lot of people have drawn various conclusions about incoming bannings and things like that. But we are going to take the time and break this decision down for the budget community from every single perspective and talk about everything that it does and does not affect for us moving forward. But before we get into all that, we here at the Stronghold are officially on the road to 1,000 subs. And guess what? When we get there, we're going to give away an account. So if you're part of the 2/3 of viewers that routinely watch my content but haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and get in, player, because we're going to be doing some magic. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. So first things first, this is just a timing change with regards to the length of time things are going to be in standard. Therefore, there is no material change expected in how we earn our resources on Arena, how much we should be playing, or how we spend those resources on an average set. As more information becomes available, this of course is subject to change, but as of right now, I see absolutely no reason to change our plan whatsoever. This relative increase in time for the standard window, of course, does affect the relative value that we get from every single thing that we do in standard. So every pack that we earn, every single that we purchase with a wild card or open from a pack, any deck that we build is now about 57% more valuable for standard because, well, standard is just going up in length. The easy answer, of course, is that it's a 50% increase, but of course, if you stop and think about it, you'll realize that the average set in standard did not exist for 24 months. And in fact, it was more like 21 months. That has now increased to roughly 33 months since we've added a full year. And again, that's about a 57% increase. By comparison, however, Alchemy, which is not affected by this change, relative to standard, has actually gone down in value about 37% or so. Because, hey, we all needed more reasons to not be interested in Alchemy. But yeah, that's right. Your golden packs are now even more valuable with regards to the cards that they give you in standard because you will be able to play all of those cards longer. More so because of pack protection, we can expect to get even more cards available to us in standard through things like golden packs or just a general store or limited packs. Because we now have a 3rd year to gather those resources. As I said, Alchemy is not affected by this calendar change, so to speak. The Innistrad sets, Kamigawa, Streets of New Capenna, and Modern Horizons will all rotate out of Alchemy with the coming of the Wilds of Eldraine set. So if there are cards in those sets that you are tired of playing against, Alchemy might be the solution that you're thinking or looking for. So I know this is an opportunity now for a lot of people to potentially reconsider Alchemy. And of course, Wizards has given a lot of reasons as to why they're treating Alchemy different. There's a lot of song and dance and hand waving here about a more curated format. And those are the same things they said when the format was first introduced. And to be perfectly honest, they just haven't followed through with that. We are not seeing the kind of curated format that has been promised in the past and is now being reiterated to us. Maybe that's going to change here. Maybe they're going to double down on their efforts here and give us a more curated format in the form of Alchemy. However, what I think has happened here is Wizards has very plainly and point blank said that this change to standard is being made in order to positively impact paper play at the store level. And by extension, that the arena players like ourselves are really just kind of along for the ride for the sake of having a uniform standard format across both paper and digital. So I don't really think it's so much about why Alchemy is different, but I think this is more about the difference between paper and digital. I guess you could argue that that is also the root of why Alchemy is different, but I don't think most arena players see it that way. Moreover, I think this sets up Alchemy as the place, the format for new players to land when they're first introduced in Arena. And I think this is very clearly supported by the 5 monocolor decks that are part of your new player experience. Of course, these cards are only legal in Alchemy, meaning 1/3 or so of the cards that they give you can't be played in Standard. Now, I had been expecting there to be some form of reset here with the 2024 new player experience decks to make these more Standard accessible. But given this news, I no longer think that's going to happen. I think we are witnessing a double down here of Alchemy being the landing zone for new players in the format that they want you to play first and foremost. I think the idea here with the longer standard is that you kind of grow into standard in that 3rd year. But frankly, I think the idea that it would take 2 years from someone to progress from Alchemy into standard at large is somewhat ridiculous. I think you're talking more along the lines of a single set release or 2 at the most if you're doing any sort of daily play. And of course, this announcement draws some serious question marks with regard to the 2024 New Player Experience Collection that is expected to be released this summer. Now that Standard is longer, we might not see a 2024 collection. All of the existing decks remain playable and viable in Standard to some degree, some more so than others. But of course, that leaves the Alchemy issue. And for that reason, I think we will still see a 2024 New Player Experience Collection update, because I think it's vital for the Arena and New Player Experience that these decks be just as viable in Alchemy as they are in Standard. Particularly with what we just finished talking about, that Alchemy appears to be the landing zone now for new players. So I do think we're going to get an update here. Exactly what that's going to look like, of course, we don't really know yet, but we're probably only about 45 days or so from really having some solid information there. But given now the questionable nature of the 2024 New Player Experience updates, my prior recommendations on pack management regarding holding packs for certain sets is in need of an update. I do still think we're going to get those updates. I do still think this is a viable strategy, but the fact that we don't know might outweigh the marginal utility that you get out of this. I do, however, think if you are still a new player, i.e. if you have not gone through a renewal season rotation yet, there is good reason to consider continuing holding your packs. I think another corner case scenario would be is if you took most of that year off, being the And that, of course, is referring to the Brothers War, the Phyrexia All Will Be One, March of the Machine, and Dominaria United. If you have taken a large window of time off during those this year and have an underdeveloped collection, there is still a solid argument for holding your packs. Also, of course, I always recommend holding your packs until you're done drafting the current set. So, March of the Machine, you probably still want to let those packs pile up. And there is still very good reason to consider holding your golden packs until the fall rotation, particularly if you have a very developed collection in the 2022-2023 sets. If you already have most of those rares, you're not doing yourself any favors by cashing in those golden packs to just get gems or unwanted rares. And now let's take a moment to address Jumpin, because this is one of those areas where the plan may need to be adjusted once we know a little bit more. You see, currently the Jumpin pack pool ranges between 40 different packs and goes all the way up to 80. If they continue to embrace a 3-year standard here with Jumpin, that means that your pool is going to range between 80 packs on the low side all the way up to 120. Of course, they may make other adjustments, but if that's the case, that is going to make Jumpin extremely difficult to use for any sort of farming activity and meaningful growth of your collection. And that's why I say we might need to make some adjustments on that. However, that having been said, I believe that they are going to want to keep Jumpin tied to Alchemy. Because if you notice, you don't get limited credit as far as rank when you play Jumpin. They have the last year or more included Alchemy packs in Jumpin, and I don't see that changing. So my guess is they're going to leave that pool range between 40 and 80 and not include any packs for that 3rd year of standard. And if that's the case, the short-term answer for Jumpin is that your packs like Enchanting and Samurai go up in relative value between now and that Lord of the Rings release reset. Enchanting, of course, just because it's a really good deck and is still worth building, and Samurai more because it has Wandering Emperor in it. When it comes to building budget decks, and of course that's what most of us are here for, they have set a tone of stimulating more and better budget decks through things like mechanics and archetypes being better developed across a 3-year standard as opposed to just the 2-year standard. And frankly, I really hope they follow through with this. I hope they find some creative ways to tie all 3 of the years together. The instance that immediately jumps to my mind is the recent green and white +1/+1 counters deck for March of the Machine, and how that's not just a stale mechanical thing. They found an inventive new way of dealing with that through the form of backup. And although backup might not spawn its own deck, it certainly contributes to a broader mechanical attribute of those +1/+1 counters that could be developed into a tri-year budget deck with very good results. Now, when it comes specifically to the budget deck tier list that I publish each and every set release, this time around we had a very narrow good deck category with only 3 decks and a potential 4th in that green-white +1/+1 counters attribute. We had a bunch of tier 2 decks that were really only tier 2 because they were getting ready to rotate. And guess what, boys? Those decks are back on the menu. And really, until we know more about the new player experience environment that's going to be created for the 2024 year, really it's hard for me to argue that there's any bad deck to be developing. If it's something you like, if it's an archetype that you enjoy, I think there's good reason to look into it, because they have set the tone that all of those archetypes are going to be supported in some way or another over the next year or two. So, there's no bad decks here right now as far as budget decks. And if you've got specific questions or thoughts on particular ones, drop them in the comments down below. I would love to explore this concept with you. And one of the last things we need to talk about is the concept of value drafting. Really, for years now, the quick draft rotation has been 2 weeks of the current set, followed by 2 weeks of an older standard legal set, and then that would repeat with the older standard legal set in constant rotation. This means that you would see a not current standard set about once every 6 months or so. So once your initial new set window closed, you were probably only going to see that set up for drafting another 3 or 4 times as a quick draft. And, well, that's worked pretty well. However, if they add another 4 non-current standard sets to that, that means that we're probably talking more along the lines of seeing that set about once a year. And that honestly is really not viable anymore. That having been said, I think they're going to keep the quick draft rotation just the way it is. So you have the not new sets from this year and last year. Third year sets, we have evidence to suggest that they are going to be offering those more often as a premier draft environment. Not nearly as economically beneficial as a quick draft environment, but it is a step in the right direction to help people build on that third year. Although, frankly, as a budget player, more often than not, I'm going to have to say pass on those. However, virtually every year there's one set that's a little better than the other 3, and those are going to be the premier draft opportunities that we are on the lookout for moving forward. And to wrap things up here, I have heard a lot of people, borderline angry at the idea of a 3-year standard. That just means that there's going to be more bans incoming. Otherwise, standard is just going to be the same 4 decks all the time, yada, yada, yada. And that might well be true. However, I think there are a couple of ways that we could expect them to potentially handle this. We might see more dominant bans for that third-year set to remove cards that, as Wizards has put it in the past, have had their moment in the sun. That would allow them to alleviate things like Kiki Jiki, Wandering Emperor, any number of cards like Bankbuster that people have played, etc., etc., etc. And it's possible that we will see these dominant bans for the third year set as early as the summer season, maybe even before Lord of the Rings comes out. However, I think there's an even more practical option here, and that would be to bring back the time-honored tradition of restricting cards. This is something we really haven't seen much during the Arena era of Magic, but it used to be if a card was particularly powerful or having a bigger than desired impact on an environment, they would restrict it rather than ban it, meaning you could still play 1 copy of a card in the deck. You see this now mostly in Vintage, and it's one of the defining differences between Vintage and Legacy. I think this could be brought to bear here very well, because the idea that they're making here is we want to extend standard so people have more opportunity to play with their cards. However, people are concerned about standard getting stale. And bans really nixes the idea of people having longer to play with their cards. Restrictions would still allow them to play with those cards, but also allow for a standard environment that continues to be fresh and changing. This is also a potential win for Wizards if you're listening, because when you ban a card, traditionally you've given us back wildcards equal to the number of copies that we owned, up to 4. If you were to restrict it, now you could do X minus 1 wildcards, which is an economic boon for you on paper when you make those quarterly reports to the overlords at Hasbro. Give it some thought, folks. And folks, before you go, make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on a thing. Because I know I can't change the Magic economy all by myself, but I think we can.